Hi, welcome to part two of our series on the SBA's recent revisions to the SOP and return of the Franchise Directory. Really very grateful to have Steve Olear of the SBA here with us to answer questions and talk about the return of the directory and some of the changes in listing on the directory from what was previously required. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. The member briefing today is being recorded, so it'll be accessible to members, on demand, and we'll send a link after the briefing ends. The briefing is only for members, so closed to press. So if you're a press, please drop off. And if you do have questions, please contact our head of communications, Captain Patterson, at patterson@franchise.org. The information that is provided today is for information purposes only. It's not legal advice. Certainly would encourage you to reach out to an attorney if you have specific questions regarding legal obligations. But happy to answer questions, general questions about the directory. If you want to drop them into the chat, we will field those as we go through the session today. Field general questions. If you have very specific questions that are fact specific related to your specific brands, please just email me offline and we can talk about how to connect with Steve directly on those. And my email address is sdavies, Davies @franchise.org. So with that, Steve, I will kick it over to you to get started. And then do share a little bit about yourself. And you've had a really long history with the SBA, and are intimately familiar with the Franchise Directory. So very much look forward to this discussion and grateful for your participation.
Great. Thanks, Sarah, so much. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you to the IFA for always being a really great partner with us in trying to, make SBA accessible to as many franchisees and franchisees as possible. So I'm really happy to be able to do this. I will tell you a couple things. I've been with the SBA 38 years. Actually, next week will be 38 years. And so, it's a great place to be. I think the mission, I've always thought the mission of SBA as the mission of IFA is so important to small businesses. And so I think that's why I do what I do, because I really believe it makes a difference at the end of the day. I'm really happy, and a lot of people are really happy that the Franchise Directory is coming back. I will tell you the response has been amazing. Our mailbox has been, I say we're averaging 300 to 400 emails a day in our mailbox. I am finally to the place where I am on like Tuesday of this week, caught up almost. So that's really good news. So the response has been really positive. The lenders have been really grateful. Franchisors have been really grateful. So I appreciate the opportunity today to get the information out to everyone, to answer some questions, to get some clarity, to give you some a little bit of feedback on some of the things we've been seeing, and maybe help speed the process up even better. I'll tell you, number one, the biggest concern folks have is how long is everything going to take? And I will tell you that we're working literally day and night on trying to process as many brands as we can. The good news is we did post an update yesterday, our first new update of the directory that went out yesterday afternoon. And so we are planning another one that if it doesn't flush today, it should flush first thing on Monday. And so we are moving forward as quickly as possible with as many updates as we possibly can. But the good news is we did get one out. It was kind of a test yesterday, and it actually went swimmingly well, which I'm really happy for. We kind of streamlined the uploading of the process, so that's worked really well as well. So I just want to talk a little bit about the process, a little bit about the directory, the benefits of the directory, just in a kind of an overall capacity, what the directory was designed to do, what it has done in the past, I believe, is that it presents an opportunity. It does kind of three things, I think. It levels the playing field for all of our lenders, right? It makes it a process that is even for everyone, right? So everyone is playing from the same rule book, everyone is playing from the same page. So it takes away all of that. Secondly, I think it provides some clarity for the lending community as to what the lenders gives the lenders the opportunity to know what SBA finds eligible. That streamlines their process because it takes away their potential risk, right? So the lender's risk in this process, if you don't know how SBA works, is we're a guarantee lender. And so for the most part, most of our lenders have a preferred status where they make decisions for the SBA. But at the end of the day, SBA will review those decisions and determine whether or not they've done it correctly. And obviously, one of the requirements is eligibility. Is the business eligible? If it's a non-franchise business, then the lender decides that themselves. If it's a franchise business, it tends to be a little bit, has a little bit more complications to it because of the franchise relationship, the agreement, the contractual relationship. And so we were, years ago, we always found that was a bit overwhelming for lenders. And if they didn't have the expertise or folks on their staff to do it, we found that in some cases, they just decided not to make those loans. And so we came up with this process a long time ago, and it's been very successful, and everyone is very happy to have it back. So what this basically does is it takes the risk out of lending to franchises for lenders. That's a huge lift because now lenders basically go to our directory. If they see it on there, then they go and process the loan like they would any other loan, and it makes it really easy. So here's a little bit about what we do. And I just kind of want to give you a background of what we do in terms of putting the directory together and what it does for lenders and what franchisors are required to do as well. So we're going to look at all the agreements that come in. And I've gotten a number of questions this week. I don't know if any of those folks are on the line as to whether or not my agreement is a franchise agreement. And we decided a long time ago that we wanted to make this as broad as possible. We wanted the directory to list all brands and any type of contractual relationship that a lender would need to look at in order to make a loan. So we adopted the FTC definition of a franchise, and that's basically what we run everything through. If it meets that definition of what the FTC determines as a franchise, then we list it as a franchise on our agreement, on our directory. And we look at traditional franchise agreements, license agreements, jobber agreements, similar types of agreements. So we're going to vet all of those. We're going to run it through that FTC rule. If it hits the rule and it's a franchise, then it must be on the directory for a lender to make a loan. And we are basically looking at the brand. We're looking at the model, the brand's model, as to whether or not that's an eligible business model for SBA. And a slide going on down in the deck a little bit, I'll explain to you our eligibility criteria. I'll set that out a little bit. So we're looking at your business model. We're looking at the FDD to see what that business model is. The other thing we're looking at in an FDD is we're looking at the history of the brand. We're looking at any potential litigation that may be involved, any kind of issues that may come up that potentially could, represent something that may present a problem for us. We are looking at the litigation section of the FDD. We're looking at the ownership section of the FDD. We're just checking to see how that brand has operated, what history that brand has had. And just because there's litigation doesn't throw it out. But we're going to look at the litigation if it's extensive or it's fraudulent or some fraudulent activity. We're going to take a look at that. And that's one of the things we actually look at. And then the last thing we look at is we look at the ability for us to freely collateralize our loan. Is there anything in the franchise agreement, in anything in the FDD that would restrict SBA's ability to secure the loan with collateral? And I have seen a lot of FDDs recently where they basically say, we want to take a lien on the assets. However, if it's an SBA loan, of course, we will subordinate to the SBA. So we see that a lot now in a lot of franchise agreements. And that's really, what we're looking to ensure that if we do have to use our proceeds for collateral, that SBA would be having a senior lien on those assets, or if there's anything that impacts the ability for us to secure a loan. Next slide. So there's the FTC definition. I just put it in there. I'm sure most of you know what it is. If you're not, I just wanted you to know what we look at in terms of making that determination. And if we find all three elements meet that definition, then we determine it's a franchise. Next slide. So we created this back in 2017. It was and it was a you know a big effort. We brought in a lot of folks. IFA was included in the process. We brought lenders in. We brought everybody in. We put this directory up, and it became wildly popular. Where we grew it from maybe 2,000 brands to over 8,000 brands. One of the really, I guess, benefits of it is that that there's no cost to it. It is a non-cost, no cost to anybody program, right? So anybody can apply to be on it, any franchise system or any entity that has any kind of contractual agreement that they want SBA to look at, or that a potential SBA loan would be made to, and we will look at it and we vet it through that process that I just talked about. And the idea that we could list these on a public website was something that, you know, again, we got a lot of feedback on it, and it seems like that was a really good way to go. And we grew it until 2023, and then, you know, it was a decision was made within the agency that we weren't going to do that any longer. And now it's back, and everyone's quite happy to have it back. And so we're basically bringing it back. We're raising it from the dead, if you will. We are grandfathering in a lot of brands, and I'll talk about that process in a second, how that works. But basically, it's on our website in the same place that we had it before. If you can't find it, you can just go into sba.gov and type franchise registry. You can, excuse me, franchise directory, or you can go on to Google and type franchise directory, and it'll pop up. So it's pretty easy to find. Again, the directory is pretty basic. It's going to determine whether the brand meets the FTC definition, and that's more for the lending community, right? We put that on there because, like I said, some brands don't meet that definition, but lenders are going to still make a loan to them, and we wanted them to know that they were eligible. So it's going to have this box that says, is it a franchise? Is it not? And we're going to determine if the business model is eligible, and if we determine it is, then that lender doesn't have to make that determination, and that's a big thing for the lending community. It takes that whole risk out of everything. We're also going to provide a franchisor identifier code. This was another thing that a lot of folks wanted, because SBA in the past, prior to our directory, we didn't have a very good coding system. It was pretty haphazard. Somebody would send a brand in, it would be given a code, and sometimes depending upon how the names were worded, like the something would get a code, and then just take the away, and then that would get a code. And so we had really bad data, and we spent a lot of time coordinating our data, and now we had very good data. From 2017 to 2023, we had really good data. And then in 2023, when we dropped the directory, we dropped the coding system. And so from 2023 to 2025, those loans were not coded as a specific franchise brand, but now we've brought that coding process back. So when lenders go in and make a loan in our e-trans system, in our system to request an SBA loan number, they actually are going to put a code in there. So we will be able to track data by franchise brand, which a lot of folks have asked us to be able to do that. So that has come back, and we have that. And then we included a note section. This is primarily for the lending community. It just tells them that there are certain things that they need to watch out for in terms of the brand, meaning that if there was language in the franchise agreement that the franchisor required that they get a security interest in some collateral, we just remind the lender that they need to follow SBA regulations and ensure they get the proper lien positions, or other things like that. We have some eligibility brands where basically there's an extra step a lender has to make to ensure that the brand meets SBA eligibility requirements. We have a number of brands that cater more to one gender or the other, and as a result, we just tell them that they're eligible as long as the lender can show that business is open to both genders or all people. So some of those notes are more specific to an eligibility requirement for SBA, but we didn't want to exclude the brand because in most cases it's eligible. So next slide. There you go. Okay, great. So what have we changed for 2025? So when we brought the directory back, we had a lot of internal discussions at SBA as to how to make it even more efficient than it was. And I think that's what we're always trying to do. And so one of the I guess, more negative aspects of the directory was the addendum process. It was pretty cumbersome and very labor intensive. And the reason we had a addendum, just as a little bit of a background, is SBA looked at franchise relationships in under the guise of affiliation. We basically said that SBA's regulations prior to 2023 basically said that if a entity had so much control over another entity, then we would affiliate them under SBA rules. And affiliation would mean that we would combine the two together. And in some cases, based on the way our size standards were taken into consideration, that business would be considered not small. We changed our affiliation regs back in 2023, and we took control out of the definition of affiliation. So that really made a kind of a big change in terms of how we look at a franchise relationship. So we no longer have that affiliation problem. And so we said, well, do we really need to have an addendum, because we really don't have to deal with that control affiliation. Now, we do look at elements of control under eligibility, but it wasn't the same as affiliation. So we were trying to figure out, well, what do we need the addendum, do we not? And we came up with a way around that, where we basically said, let's get rid of the addendums. We don't really need them. They're cumbersome. And we moved to a certification process. And we kind of had a certification process under the old directory, where we had brands certify on a yearly basis. We had certain brands, if they were using a certain addendum, they had to certify. So we thought that process was helpful. We also went out to IFA, went out to a lot of other folks and said, look at our certification. This is going to be cumbersome to franchise folks, and we all worked together and came up with a certification. And I will say, I've not had anybody come to me so far, and I hope not. I hope today's not the day, but I haven't had anybody really come to me and tell me, oh, I can't really sign this. We tried to make it broad enough that it wouldn't be too restrictive, and we tried to cover everything we needed to cover. So basically, we've come up with a process that gets rid of the addendums. So there's no longer an addendum loan per loan per loan. And we ask for a one-time certification to be signed. Certification blends in some of the elements from the addendum, and we added a couple of other things. And it's a one-time process. You sign it once, and you agree that in all of the anytime you make a loan or get any of SBA assistance, that you will comply with what's in the certification. So that's been fairly good. I think it's worked really well so far. Like I said, the feedback has been really, really good. So the process, if we could go to the next slide, Sarah. Great. So the process, this is kind of where we are now. We are coming live on June 1, which is Sunday. So starting on Sunday, the requirements are back. The SOP, our new SOP, our 5010-8, which brought back a lot of the policies that were in place prior to our change in 2023. All lenders are required to ensure that if they make a loan to a franchise brand, it's on the directory. So we knew that we wouldn't have a lot of time to make significant changes to the directory process, because we really only got official notification that this was all going to happen really at the towards the end of April. So we knew that we wouldn't have enough time to completely overhaul the directory. So we are grandfathering in all the brands that were on it previous to it going down in 2023. So all those brands that were on there are still eligible and on there. And what we're basically saying is we're trying to shift everybody over to this certification. And we're giving everybody basically 3 months. We've been having a lot of people sign certifications since we started at the beginning of May. And we're giving everybody to the end of July. So it's going to be kind of a two-pronged system going forward, starting on Monday. If a franchisor has provided a certification, and I'm going to say we've gotten close to 500 certifications in this month. So if a franchisor has provided a certification prior to June 1st, it should show up on the directory that they no longer need an addendum. So basically, we've added a column into the directory. It's going to say, franchise yes or no. It's going to say franchisor certification, yes or no. Well, it won't say no, to just say Y for yes. And then if it's a Y for yes on the franchisor certification, then all of the addendum blocks are empty. So that means that if a franchisor has signed a certification, we'll note that on the directory, and then the lender will not require an addendum from you, and you will not be required to provide an addendum for any SBA loans. If, however, you haven't submitted us a certification by June 1st, then you will still stay on the directory as an eligible brand, and the lenders will be required to follow the addendum process until you switch over. And like I said, we've been getting a lot of certifications in, and as you do that, as you certify, we will then update the directory to make that change. We're asking that everybody do that by July 31st. If not, then we're going to start to remove the brand. And again, I think there could be some flexibility in that date. We'll see where we are as we get closer to July 31st. But we're trying to get the word out as much as possible that if your brand is still active, if you're still actively franchising, and you still want to remain on the directory, that you provide that certification. So it's going fairly well. It's been really good. Just a couple of things on the certification. This will really help us a lot. The way we designed the certification is that we designed it so that you are at the very end, there's a signature block on there. And we asked for the name of the brand, and then, of course, the name of the franchisor, the legal entity. The name of the brand is really what we're going by, right? We've noticed that a lot of brands have changed, or their names have changed since they've been originally listed on the directory. And some of the brands have been on the directory in 2017, right? So what we're asking, and this is a really good opportunity to get this out, is clarify for us what you want your brand to be listed as. What I'm finding, and what's taking a lot of time for us, is we get a certification in, and the brand on the certification doesn't match the brand name that's currently on the directory, right? So then I'm saying, well, is it a name change? I don't know if it's a name change. Is it just you decided to put this name down, but you still want that name? So it's a back and forth. It's taking more time. So what could really help us streamline the process is that whatever you put on that certification should be the name that you want to show up as the brand name on the directory. And again, I know names have changed, and if it has, you can just tell us in the email, oh, by the way, we changed our name, and our new name is X. And that's why the name doesn't match. Because what I find is I look for the name, I can't find it. Then I write an email and say, I can't find that. Are you on there? And then they write back to, oh, yeah, because we changed our name to this. And then I look and we go back and forth. And that takes, a day, 2, 3 days, a couple of emails back and forth, where we could really streamline that process. So I really could use your help on that. If you really are clear to us, if the names change, let us know. Tell us what exactly you want it to be in the certification. That would be really helpful.
Steve, just a couple of questions, just clarifying questions on that. So, do you want just our name changed, or do you want, like, we had a change in ownership, and so now this is like the brand name has always been the same, but due to changes in ownership, this is like the legal entity? Do you want that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the change of entity is not as big a concern for us because we're updating that. So I'm assuming I'm seeing a lot of people that change their entity names. That's not such a big deal for us. It's what the actual. I got to match the brand up. If it's a brand that's currently on there, I have to match it, and because we have codes that go with that. So it's more about the brand name than the legal. Whatever you put for legal entity name on the certification, we're going to change that in our database and leave that as the legal name. And I think this is really good because we are able to update all those names now, because a lot of them have obviously of things have changed in 2 years. So I think that's really happy.
And then one other point just on the timing. So I don't know, I know you're getting a ton of emails and a ton of certifications in. If a brand submits the certification prior to July 31st or on July 31st, but it hasn't been processed. Presumably they
Yeah,
should continue
we're
to
not going to.
send them until they receive confirmation from the SBA that the certification has been reviewed and processed.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, I have to talk to senior management about this. I mean, I anticipate that we would have flexibility. This isn't a regulation, right? So it's not like we're not complied by regulation to do something by a certain date, right? This was an arbitrary date that we set just because we wanted to move this process forward. But I'm not going to take anybody off if we're still in, going back and forth, if they submitted on time. And honestly, I'll see where we are on July 31st. I mean, if there's still a lot of brands on there and we think we need more time, then I'm willing to go out on a limb and try to get more time. So yeah, I'm not. And honestly, if that brand gets taken off and then they submit a certification 2 days, a week later, we'll just put them back on. So I don't see that to be a terrible process. And nor do we want to make that a terrible process. So it's just a date that we set so we could kind of clean things up a little bit.
And then to the extent you, like, as you said today, is there like a rough estimate that franchisors that were previously on the directory should expect from the date that they submit the certification to the date that they receive some sort of confirmation from the SBA?
Yeah, the certifications are going really quickly, right? The certifications, I'm trying to do five business days, and I'm there now. I'm totally there now. I've gone through the mailbox, and I am up to Tuesday of this week, and I've processed every certification that I've had that's come into the box, right? The certifications are very easy to process, right? They go, and I'm going through those. It's the new brands that take a little bit of time. We once we get caught up, we want to commit to a 5 business day review period. But I'm going to be honest, we just can't meet that today. There's just overwhelming number of brands. I do think we've added in this month, I want to say close to over 100 brands this month. We've gotten vetted through those. But once we get back on track, we're going to try to stay with the 5 days. But the certifications are going even faster than that. Even today, they are. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. Next slide. And then for all new brands that come on to the directory, they've never had to deal with an addendum. So they're going to be just processed through. Once we've determined that your brand meets our eligibility requirements, then we're going to send you an email that says, we've reviewed your brand. We feel it meets our SBA eligibility requirements. Here's a copy of our Franchisor Certification. Please execute it, send it back. Once you send an executed certification back, then we put you on the directory. Obviously, we just click the box that says certification yes, and there's no addendum process, and you're on the directory. So anybody new coming on will not have to deal with that addendum issue at all. Next slide.
And then just one clarification for
Okay.
new brands, because we had a question come in. So for new brands that were not previously on the directory, that are submitting for to be included in the directory, do the terms of the franchise agreement and the disclosure document have to reflect the requirements that are in the certification for eligibility for SBA?
Good question. That's a great question. Thank you. No, the answer is no. Basically, what the certification acts similar to an addendum, right? So we understand that there's certain things in your franchise agreement that you want that you've put in there that potentially are problematic for SBA. That's where we came up with this kind of addendum. The certification basically says, even though your franchise agreement says this, if it's an SBA loan, you're going to do it this way, as opposed to the way that the franchise agreement reads. So we're not requiring you change the franchise agreement. We're just basically saying you're certifying that if you're making an SBA loan in terms of these things, you're going to do it the way we've asked you to, not the way your franchise agreement. So you don't need to change the franchise agreement. It doesn't need to reflect anything differently than you normally would.
On that point, I think just for the people on the call, a helpful way for me to think about it that Steve, we talked about early on, is the same way that the state addenda work, right? And say you have this uniform franchise agreement and disclosure document, and then the states, have state-specific addenda that basically do exactly what you just said, which is to these, the provisions of your franchise agreement and disclosure document are inconsistent with the requirements of California law, for example. then, these provisions would not be enforceable. So I think that's a helpful analogy.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Yes.
We're going to the next one.
Okay. Next slide. So I won't read through this. I mean, most of you probably have seen it, but this is the terms of the certification, and a lot of it is the same that we've had in the franchisor addendums that we had. So basically, we've just expanded a little bit, but not really. We've hit the same issues. Reasonable transfer, partial right of first refusal issues. Real estate, the ability to lease the real estate up to the term of the franchise agreement. So nothing really, we didn't add anything new really in here. We just kind of moved things into a certification process. So I just put those in the slides for you if you didn't see our certification, that you would know what the major terms of it is. So you can kind of pass through these slides. And we have one for franchisors and one for distributors as well. I don't know if we have any gas folks on here, but we did design one for the fuel industry, if you will. And we have a separate one for that.
I know we have at least some attorneys on the call that
yeah.
So I think that's a helpful flag.
So yeah, I just want to put it on there. Okay, so you can go there. Okay, and so what we did put in, and this is one of the things that we unfortunately sometimes have to look at. If we find a bad actor, we didn't really have a process to remove a bad actor from our directory, right? And so we've gotten a lot of requests from the Hill, and they would say, well, why is this brand on the directory? How could they be on your directory if somebody knows they've done something, or they've have fraudulent action, or there's something happening? We didn't have anything really in our regs, in our SOP, nothing that really applied to a franchisor on this directory that we created. So we did put in a provision that says, we at least have some ability to go back to you and say what happened, give you 30 days to think, try to tell us why something is happening or hasn't happened. So we did put that in there. Everyone's vetted it, and we tried to make it broad enough that it didn't kind of capture things that it shouldn't capture. And I think for the most part, it's worked well. But just so you know, that's something new that we did put in our certification that wasn't in the addendum, or really wasn't anywhere else. Next slide. Eligibility. So everyone, this is what we look at in determining whether or not the business model is eligible and whether or not they can get put on there. So we have passive businesses, and I know we've had some issues with cleaning models and salon suites and those brands. And Sarah had brought up a question about if you've been ineligible before, does that mean you're automatically ineligible now? And I'm going to always say no. I'm always going to say no. There's always a second look, and there's always maybe ways to fix it. And we have proof of that from a number of different places. We used to look at the Temporary Employment Agency as an ineligible type business. And we spent a lot of time last time we had the directory. They were one of those brands that, we said we're ineligible, and they're on the directory now. I mean, we have a couple of extra steps they have to go through, but they're on there. We have some cleaning models that are on there that actually they've made some changes, and we've looked at it. So I'm never going to say you should never come back to us and ask the question. You should always come back to us and ask the question, and we'll look at it. And if we can find a way to make it work, we certainly will. One of the other ones on there is illegal activity. The CBD products and marijuana products, those things. And we did have a brand right before we shut down the directory in 2023 that had situations where they were selling CBD products. And we were in the process of working out a way for them to have locations where they didn't sell those products, right? And so, again, we try as much as we can to get where we need to get. It may not always happen, but we try. Businesses that restrict patronage or have discriminatory hiring practices, pure sexual, material, or speculative businesses. That's pretty much our eligibility list. So again, never say never. Come in if you think that, and we want to have a discussion. I'm happy to have a discussion about that. Next slide. Franchise codes, and again, like I said, when we put a brand on there that meets our eligibility requirements, we are going to define it with a code. So those codes are coming back. Be aware that there are some brands on there that that are not eligible for certain parts of our loan program. So I talked about passive businesses just a minute ago. SBA in our 7A loan program and our 504 loan program, which is our two main programs, we don't allow lenders to make loans to businesses that we consider to be passive. However, in our disaster loan programs, we do allow businesses that are passive to get disaster loans. So what we've done is not a lot of brands, but some of the brands that may have been ineligible under our 7A or 504 program are eligible under our disaster loan programs, and we've listed them that way. So you may see some brands on there, and our disaster folks don't need codes. So those brands are on there without a code, and there's a note that says they're only eligible for certain loan programs. And of course, PPP, the eligibility requirements when we were doing PPP loans were much broader than our 7A and 504 ones. So there's a lot of stuff on there that says PPP only. And we're leaving those on there at the moment just because we have a lot of unsettled business in our PPP loan program. So those ones are on there. But just realize that some brands that may be franchises don't have a code, and that's kind of the reason why they don't have a code. Next slide. Yeah, actually, you can skip through this. This is a little bit what lenders have to do. So I didn't want to. I just throw that in there just so that they know. Everyone knows what a lender has to go through to get. The lender's going to have to check the directory, make sure the brand's on there, make sure the brand is a code, and enter the code into each brand is our application system. So you can go to the next slide.
Yeah, I actually think that's helpful in understanding.
Okay.
Like, this is the process for the lender, and also that, just because a brand is listed on a directory, the lender still has to go through its due diligence process with respect to that specific applicant to determine whether they qualify for the loan that they're applying for. So I do think that's helpful. One question, just because it's come up a couple of times. So the process for both the certification and for new brands applying is laid out very clearly in the updated SOP that's available on the SBA's website. It's chapter 1G, it's like pages 33 and 34 of that SOP, but for folks that are having a difficult time finding the certification, it's in the new SOP. So which is just a document, just pull it up and go to that chapter. That is the franchise section, and you'll find all the information on how to submit, what needs to be submitted. There it goes.
Yeah, and it's also on the Franchise Directory webpage. If you go to the actual Franchise Directory webpage, there's a button that says "Click for more information," and it lays out all of the processes are there as well. And the certification is on the website as well. If you just type in Franchisor Certification, you'll find it. I just threw this in for clarification for everybody, so they understand how we look at development agreements. And I'm going to say, 99% of the development agreements that are attached to franchise agreements are eligible. And those are the multi-unit development agreements, right? So a lot of brands offer some kind of a multi-unit, alternative open 2 to 3 brands. And basically, if the development agreement is such that it's the franchisee or an affiliate of the franchisee that is opening those units, then SBA finds that to be an eligible a development agreement, not a problem. The ineligible ones are the ones where there's a third party, almost sub-franchisor, and that if that entity that was going to operate under like an area development agreement, I think some of them are called, or area representative agreement, if that entity was going to try to get an SBA loan operating under that type of agreement, they would not be eligible. We would find them to be passive. And the way SBA looks at this is we determine that a franchisor is an eligible, and we'll talk about that in another slide, but a franchisor is an eligible business for SBA, right? Because the franchisor's business is to grow their brand. That's what the franchisor's business is. A sub-franchisor or an area representative, if you will, however you want to define that, is not in the business to grow their brand. They're in the business to grow the franchisor's brand for a profit. And that's where basically SBA says that's more of a passive type relationship. So we tried to separate those out. And sometimes there'll be a note on the directory that'll say the area representative agreement is not eligible for SBA financing because it involves a kind of sub-franchisor relationship. So I just wanted you to understand how we look at development agreements and let you know that the majority of them we find to be eligible.
Can I
So
a clarifying question there, just because that's a question that I've received. So if under the area representative agreements, the area representative is essentially performing all of the obligations of the franchisor. So the area representative is participating in like candidate selection and site selection support and operational oversight and marketing support and all of those things. Would that be considered differently, or is it just across the board? If you have an area representative agreement, that's just the determination is that they're not eligible.
So that's a very good question. I'm going to say most of them are going to be ineligible. There are some brands, and again, I don't want to get brand specific on here. There are some brands that the way they're divided up, they're not. They move out of an area development space and move into a almost co-franchise or space. And so as a result, we've found some of those to be eligible. And that's more case by case. The ones that are not eligible is someone that gets a territory like LA. If someone, a third party came in and said, develop, this LA, or, and that was really big, but develop a certain portion and you go out and recruit franchisors for that. Those ones are probably not going to be eligible, but like I said, there are some bigger type operations that involve a bit more that we have found to be eligible. So I would say it's kind of case by case. I don't know if that helps or not.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
That's very
yeah.
Sorry, are we moving on?
Okay, you can go through these 3 slides pretty quickly. That I just explained what they were, just what
Very good. Yeah.
Right. And then I don't know. Oh, the franchisor applicant. Yeah. So, we used to make a big mess of this. I'll be the first person to admit that, because we had affiliation, right? And the way we looked at affiliation in the past, when we had our affiliation regs that included control, we basically said pretty much every franchise agreement created affiliation, right? I mean, basically we saw it as a controlling relationship, and that's where we got these addendums, right? We developed these addendums, and that basically unhooked the franchisee from the franchisor, right? So if the franchisor and the franchisee executed our addendum, then we said the franchisee was not affiliated with the franchisor, and the franchisee could get a loan. But when we had this rule in place, we looked at franchisors and we said, well, wait a minute, franchisors are basically affiliated to every one of their franchisees, right? Because they all sign franchise agreements, and not every single franchise agreement that a franchisor signed was an SBA loan. It didn't have an addendum. So that was a very big struggle for us because we didn't know how to handle a franchisor applicant. So basically we created this global addendum, and some of you may have been a part of that. I don't know if anyone was, but we basically created this global addendum, which said the franchisor was going to agree, almost like the certification, that in every case, not just for SBA, but for every case, they wouldn't apply their principles. And that was a hard leap to get to, and that was really difficult to do. Now affiliation is gone, so we don't have to deal with that any longer. So basically a franchisor, we consider a franchisor to be an eligible potential business model, providing one, that their brand is on the directory. So if a small franchisor wants a loan and their business model has been vetted by us and they're on the directory, then that's step number 1. And then they have to determine whether or not they meet SBA size standards, right? So in the past, when we had affiliation, we had to combine all of the franchisees into the franchisor, which pretty much knocked them out of any size standard we could ever think of. But if we have a small enough franchisor that meets their size requirements under the NAICS codes, then potentially they could be eligible for a loan. because there's no affiliation or there's no linking to their franchisees. And then the last part is making sure the applicant franchisor themselves meet SBA's requirements. And, we've changed some of our ownership requirements as to citizenship and things like that. So those are the three pieces that a franchisor applicant for an SBA loan would have to go through. It's much, much easier now that we don't have the affiliation reg in place. We don't have to deal with that problem. So I just wanted to throw that out there so just people knew that was a possibility where it was much harder in the past.
One question while we're talking about eligibility that's come up, and it may be also like fact specific and system specific, but the healthcare franchises that have the medical services agreement arrangements, should those also be like, should they be reaching out to the SBA on kind of a case by case basis, or is that kind of in a camp of?
We struggled with those before, but we've come out the other side on that. I mean, for the most part, we find them to be okay. I know I got a question. I think it was, I don't know if it was an IFA or if it was one of the lender conferences about some states that have certain requirements in that capacity. I think one of them was California, where because there's a management agreement, if there's a management agreement in place, right? SBA has changed our rules in management agreements. We've brought back a review of management agreements, but to a lesser extent, right? Right now our review of management agreement says, is the management agreement such that the business becomes passive, right? As they turn over everything to the management company, and as a result, the small business owner is not doing anything. These medical ones don't do that, right? There's a split. There's a complete split. So it doesn't fit into that box. But somebody told me, and I don't know if it was California, someone was telling me that a certain state or states require that the medical professional be the borrower, not the manager. And I needed to explore that more. So I don't know if I don't know that. I didn't know enough about that. But from our perspective, that relationship is eligible, right? We have a number of those on there, right? And I've looked at and that's the other thing I don't know if I put that slide in there, but we basically throw the review of management agreements back to the lending community. But if a franchise agreement has a management agreement attached to it, we will review it. And we will determine if it doesn't meet our requirements. And the ones that I've seen recently, they're all fine. All those management agreements have been fine. So I don't think that medical chiropractic one is a problem really anymore.
Perfect. That was the question.
Yeah. That's it. I think that's it for questions. So
let me make sure I don't have any more. I think that is it. If you have additional questions, please feel free to, certainly you can reach out to Steve if you, or me, and I can get them over to Steve if that's easier. And thank you, Steve, thank you so much. This was incredibly helpful and
oh no.
And so great at just kind of, I think, clearing up a lot of the confusion that has been circulating around. So very grateful for this time and this really great presentation.
No, my pleasure. Anytime. Happy to have discussions. And like I said, if you have questions, it's franchise@sba.gov. Send them in, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Or if Sarah, you get any, or if anybody has any, forward them on.
I've been funneling them to you. So
yeah, exactly. We'll be happy to do that. So anyway, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Okay, bye everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Okay.
Bye.